Struppi, what can you do with tetrahedrons?
Anything. Anything and everything. I mean, one thing I think I need to say before I say anything else, which is you spoke of the name, right? You spoke of the tetrahedron and sort of mentioned that it speaks more of the fourness than the oneness to you. And I like that thought. However, my feeling towards that name is that when I got into synergetics, which is a few years back, you know, I read the whole thing and I was like, whoa, all of this makes perfect sense. However, I had no experience with any of those shapes. And for a while, I went with the vocabulary of synergetics of Bucky's. But as I grew more and more familiar with these structures by growing more of them, I quickly came to realize that I don't like the word tetrahedron for a different reason. Because the polyhedra, as the Greek named them, within their concept of geometry, which is a fairy tale of sorts, all of disembodied abstractions, they thought of the polyhedra as these superficial systems where you have a surface, but the surface is of nothingness, just as the whole thing is a nothing because it's an abstraction. And I've come to realize that I have not ever in my life met a tetrahedron. What I have met plenty of is what I call four eyes. So if I may show you where the four eyes comes from.
Please take your time, Struppi.
This,
up to here.
You see, these are four spheres. In this case, they are wooden beads, big ones. And you can see it's basically like I've got three of them sitting on my hand and the fourth one sits on top. And what they open up between them is the four eyes. Why do I call it four eyes? Because when you have three spheres, there's a gap between them. There's always an opening between the three spheres. There is no surface there, right? There is no hedron. However, there is an opening. And well, we have many names for many things, but we have in English the window, which comes from Gothic Windauge, has to do with the eye, Windauge in German. And we have then perhaps the option of calling this, if we can understand that when we have three spheres, they open up something that we can look through both ways. And we can make the little leap of faith of saying, well, let's call it an eye because that's what we look through always, you know, anything we look through is an eye. Then, you know, we get to a place where we can see that this opens up not just one eye, that would be three spheres, but it opens up four eyes. And then this is a four eyes, you know, the next one of the basic structures would be wherever it is. I've got too many of them. That always takes time to find the one I'm looking for. But the next one that grows is the eight eyes, aka octahedron. But again, there is no single octahedron in universe, whereas there is plenty eight eyes. Anyways, I'm looking for it. Never mind. But with this simple trick, we can translate it back into Greek if we need to, right? For some languages, it seems easier to speak an ancient tongue than in their own. But I can say Vierauge, I can say four eyes, I can say tetraops, right? So there's a lot of possibilities to play there. But that's something about the way that I've come to speak of these things. So to me, synergetics, another way of naming it would be spherical thinking. And it's a practice. It's not just an abstract framework, but it's a real practical one, because I can basically grow any kind of solution to any kind of need that I have along this way of the spheres, as I call it. Bucky, when he first got into this stuff and kind of realized the depth of it, he called it the theory of the spheres, went through many iterations of the name, came to Synergetics. I learned it from him, and with a background in Taoism and the Tao Te Ching, and realizing that the Tao Te Ching is basically speaking of synergetics in a more poetic form, but all of it, like, if you like, this four eyes and the rest of the way of the spheres, of all of these geometries, it's the geometries of the Tao, very clearly. And there's innumerable references in all kinds of spiritual traditions where we have 12 around 1, or we have the Eightfold Path, and all of these have clear relationships with these geometries. But since we're here just at the beginning, I want to point out that what is especially unique about the four eyes, there's a few things that are absolutely unique about it. The first one is, it is the first sphere out of spheres. What do I mean by that? Well, Bucky showed that just as the polyhedra thing is basically a trick of the mind of the Greek, because they forgot the very bodies they drew their geometry upon, their idea of a sphere doesn't hold, because they thought of it as a hermetically sealed object which has the same radius all around, infinite number of points with 360 degrees around them. That is non-existent. It's violating all thermodynamic rules and everything. However, we can say a sphere is a membrane, at minimum a membrane of members, which are constituent spheres mostly, if we have molecules or atoms or whatever, or organs in a body. We have a membrane, and this membrane is binding the inside of the body to its outside, right? So here's another sense of integration, because the identity of anybody in universe is universe, as bound by that membrane, right? So you and I were both sharing the integrity or the identity of being universe in our different shapes. And that's important, you know. Boundary is not something that is separating or dividing. It's something that's binding inside and outside. And with the membrane binding those two sides of the whole together, we also get always a center of gravity, right? And that was what Kurt wanted me to show you. So this is four eyes. If we look at it this way, this is more like what you were showing in your diagrams. I've shrunken the beads or the spheres, but really the actual spheres that are here, even if we can't see them, are this big. So every line in the system is the distance from one heart of one sphere, one center of gravity, through the radius of that sphere to the point where it meets the next sphere, and then another radius to the next heart. So the length of this is 2 times the radius. It's the same as the diameter of one sphere. So you see this, but really it's still 4 spheres present.
Wow.
Right.
Struppi, that is amazing. That is amazing, because this is like moving from Plato to Aristotle, because the Greeks, they thought of kind of these disembodied things.
Absolutely.
That they started with. What Bucky does and what you're doing here is you are starting with things that are there in nature, the spheres that are there in nature. And then you are building everything,
growing
from natural patterns that are there in it.
Indeed. It's letting universe play out, because it's all these patterns are present already, whether we embody them or not. But as we know the patterns, and most importantly, we need to understand the identity that Bucky found of structure and triangle, right? Because a cube is not a structure. You can make it a construct if you put in a structure into the cube, then it's a construct. It's with structure.
Yes.
But it's a utterly irrelevant to my mind and irrational in terms of space-time. It's an irrational frame, and it doesn't help anybody to do anything really. But that now it's a cubic shape, right? But it's because everything is triangles now. The whole of it is triangles.
Wow.
And triangles are structure because every member of a triangle is holding everyone else in place, which is not to say that anything about it is static, right? This is all moving. It's just moving in unison. It's holding in place, but that's still an active process. But if I take this very cube shape and put it like this, we get that center of gravity.
Wow.
That Kurt was pointing out. And this is also reminiscent of what Kirby Erner and others have developed as the so-called quadray system, which is a coordinate system where the spheres matter more than the boxes. And as we're here with the box, let's take it off once more and watch what happens, because this is a transform, right? It's not a shape. Mm-hmm. But I can put it this way as we had it, mm-hmm. making it the quadray. Mm-hmm. I could make it this way and have one point unfolding it. Mm-hmm. So now it's a hex, all triangles. But the hex isn't plain, it can fold. It can be 2 4 eyes like so. Mm-hmm. It could also go halfway and then it's 1 4 eyes.
Wow.
You can fold it all the way down into 1 eye. And there's a lot, a lot of things that this can be, while it cannot hold that box, right? So I've shown you this very model, and maybe 2 more things to mention.
Please.
Yes, one thing which is absolutely significant about the 4 eyes is that the 4 eyes is the only one of the structures of space-time where you always have a vertex, what you call the vertices, on the opposite side of an eye, right? So I have a sphere here and an eye looking at it, or it's the eye that the sphere looks out of. Mm-hmm. And that is true for every one of those. So if we're identifying the spheres with concepts as you did, like love and unity, and no, those were the same. But if we address them with these concepts, then we can also see that the eye on the other side is the same concept.
Yes.
But it's opened in between the 3 concepts that open up this eye, right? So there is a beautiful kind of playfulness in all of these structures, because all of them are fractals. Everything about them is fractals, and we can move freely within that framework, centering on this, on that, or the other. And when I speak of this spherical thinking, these many eyes, polyops, they are many-form, polyform, right? They're not uniform as the boxes pretend to be, but when we open up more complex structures of space-time, we always get a kind of complementarity where between the 4 eyes there's gaps which are 8 eyes, and between those are gaps which are 4 eyes the other way around, that kind of thing. And we can decide what we focus on, but we don't only have that option of saying, okay, it's polycentric too. Every center in it is equally valid, right? We don't need to say we're only investing in heliocentric or geocentric or anthropocentric or whatever centric, because every center is equally the center of the universe. And we don't need to ignore all the rest if we're focusing on or tuning into one. But we can also qualify space-time, because with this framework we get natural relationships between these shapes in terms of their volumes and their qualities, which aren't there if all we have is a unit box, right? So that's some of these thoughts. And now the last one, since I showed you this, this one is also just put together. These are, most of the things that I do are strings running through beats. So they're all tensecrities, but not the kind of tensecrity that Bucky made so popular. And if I disconnect this, you see that it is really all free to move, because this is just 2 loops of string running through 3 straws with a beat on each end here. So this can fold up, right? And you see, if I take one of these, I can show you again that if I have this, this is 2. This is like a pair of levers, right? And I have a fulcrum there, and I can move this any which way, because this is really just 1 sphere here and 1 sphere and 1 sphere, and the 2 run around the 1. And only when the 3 meet do we have this pair of levers held in place by that and by all the way around. So if I connect this here, I get a triangle, 1 eye. So this is 2 triangles, right? 1 and 1. Clearly, I think we can all agree this is 2 eyes. I could connect them up like this and it would still be 2 eyes, right? But watch what happens if I integrate the 2, if I grow them together. So I open them up and I take this, and since I don't call them vectors anymore, what you call the edges, I call them fingers, right? I've got a vocabulary that speaks in terms of body parts or body members to make sense of all of this, because I think it's valid and it helps tremendously in grasping and understanding the actual corporeality of these structures, because they are there whether we recognize them or not. But if I speak of this as a finger, it's worthwhile pointing out that every finger points 2 ways, right? If I point my finger at you, it's also pointing at me, right? So every finger points 2 ways. This is also a line, as the Greek called it, but it's not a line of division. It's a line of connection. It's not going straight to infinity, but it's going with however tense we make it, more or less straight in between 2 points, connecting them. Now, if this is a finger and this little button is a fingertip, and I can put that into the corner of an eye here, and put that in between the loop of string that's running in there. Yep, like so. And I've got a connection. And I'll take the next and bring that into a corner of an eye here. And that gives us the first of the eyes, right? And we have 3 left. So let's connect the next fingertip into this corner of the eye. And we got a pair of eyes, right? Which is like a hinge or like a butterfly or a bird or something. Happy cat. And we still have 1 finger to go, right? So if we connect that one to this corner of the eye, we actually get back to where we began. We get back to the 4 eyes. And with this, we realize something very wild, right? Because a minute ago, I showed you 2 seemingly separate eyes, right? It's 1 plus 1, but 1 and 1 gives us 4.
Wow.
Because this is all playing with synergy. And in terms of synergy, every time we add something, we're complementing, we're growing the whole more and more whole. And as we do that, the wholeness of it is giving us more and more in return. So the more and more complex we make these structures, the more and ever more they give us back, which is the secret, if you like, of universe, because all life in universe is only possible because of this, because it's synergetic. You know, if the first two amoebas on Earth had gone the way of the box mind of going, I'm better than you, and killed the other, then we wouldn't have even started, right? Mm-hmm. But they realized, oh, wait, if I eat you and I let you live within me, then suddenly I've got someone who's taking care of this need, and we're growing further from there, right? So it's integrating, it's adding to the wholeness. And by that, we open up something that we are already coming out of, right? We are all grown out of universe. We're all outcomes of generations and generations and generations of life doing the same play on all levels of existence, from macro to micro. And except for this static frame of mind that we've been conditioned with, which is it's the embodiment, if only of this, it's the embodiment of the human nature, right? We look at the universe, spheres, spheres, spheres everywhere. We're in the mesocosm, right? Macrocosm is pretty spheres, microcosm is spheres, and we're in the middle, and it's easy to overlook the spheres because they are so small, they make all these funny, strange bodies that don't necessarily look like spheres. But we look closer and we find them still. And then we find within all of those shapes, universe is doing just a few cubic shapes, maybe some crystals, wombat poo, and some radiolaria, as far as I know. And I'm looking out for them, you know, I'm counting on them. I haven't found more than that. And then we look at the human sphere, and it's all boxes. Even the odd sphere, the odd ball somewhere here and there, we look at it, it's made up of squares that are stretched to make a sphere. So even that is thought of in boxes. And we think in terms of square one, and then square meters and cubic meters and all of these things. But the trouble is, if we say this is one, and we call those things normal, then the significant bit that we're ignoring in this, which held its shape, is rendered abnormal. It's defined as irrational if we say that this is rational. And then none of it makes sense. There is no rational triangle, there's no rational hexagon, there's no rational circle, there's no rational sphere, there's nothing rational in so-called nature. But that is not because of nature. That's not because of universe faults. It's because we've been taught a way of thinking that chose to ignore the embodiedness of universe. And I, for one, am very much speaking to that every day, because I feel it significant and important that we clarify that. We need to realize that what the Greek called geometry isn't geometry. It's a story that takes all the tools and patterns of geometry and renders them abstract and useless. Not useless in an absolute sense, because yes, we can create this world that we live in. And if I'm looking at the screen and I see you all, like in most places, I see many, many, many squares and cubes and boxes all around you, which is what we think of as normal. But I don't think it is normal. And I don't think we have to live in that world anymore. Indeed, I think if we continue living in that very alien frame of mind, which might be the strangest thing the universe has ever come up with, if we do keep on thinking in that term, then we keep disintegrating universe. We keep destroying the biosphere, creating mass extinction, pollution, waste. Why is there waste in the human sphere? Because I had to cut these short so that these would hold them. If this was trees, I had to cut the trees. However, I could have put these together as an 8-ice and I would have had more volume in it. There wouldn't be a waste. You know, the same thing with efficient and inefficient. That's a dichotomy that's false, because the only reason we know of inefficiency and efficiency is because we have a false framework. Universe doesn't do anything inefficient. Universe does never use any way but the shortest way with least resistance. And that is the one way we find all over these things, which is the way of the spheres. And it's a simple and easy way to wonder if we just open our minds to it and allow ourselves to dare to be naive.
Struppi, that was brilliant and beautiful. That was just amazing. Just love it. And I would love to have you come back and to show us more. I will go ahead and email you and we will go ahead and do that. Thank you for staying up, way in the wee hours of the morning in Germany to do this. I want to say two things about it, two things that really stand out to me. The first one is on metaphors. We've been studying metaphors here at 52 Living Ideas. And metaphors are very deep, and they are life-giving, because what it does is that everything that you know about human body gets transferred to what you're talking about. Everything that you know about eyes, that you can have 4 eyes, you can have 4 perspectives on the same thing, and that makes it come alive. And when you talk about fingers, the entire, yeah, exactly. And the interactivity of it, comes alive. So it's just, so that was one, yes, exactly. And this is fundamental. It's, like if you go back, actually language is built out of metaphors. All the concepts that we have were built out of metaphors, except that we then forgot how to actually generate new things. And we kept on using the things that other people had made, but in a way where we did not have the appreciation of the metaphor that built it. When you look through the roots, you find that. The second point I'm going to make is that just like the Greeks, Greek geometry started with something which was not real, something that was imagined of points, because there are no points. There are no lines like they think of. There is no infinity like they think of. It's all made up. Similarly, the modern person is the Cartesian. These are the Cartesian coordinates. And it creates this different, it breaks up the unity between mind and body. It basically divides things up, it slices things up, and things are no longer alive. So beautiful, beautiful presentation. I really appreciate that. And this is such a pleasant surprise, This is the synergy of the world, that you just show up, and this is great. So I look forward to having you back. Now, would love to hear anybody who wants to talk about tetrahedrons. This is so much more, thanks to Struppi, than what I had even hoped for. It's just complete pleasant surprise. And we are going to now go to various people. Mike, 2 minutes.
1 minute.
Go ahead.
Have you, what you've got is the secret of life and the universe. The valence of carbon is 4. It's a tetrahedron. And DNA, modern medicine. Have you extended this into a dictionary or something for protein folding, because that's where the secret of life and how consciousness even arose out of a carbon soup. Uh, I don't know. This is exciting. I wish I knew a lot more about what was going on inside your mind when you did this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. Next up is Evanique.
Can I maybe get an answer to some of that?
Sure. You're asking me, or are you asking Struppi? Mike.
It felt like
anybody who's got an answer would be good. I was asking you, or I'll ask Struppi.
Sure. Okay. My answer, Mike, is that I'm just getting started with this. I'm just getting started with this. It's like I've been trying to do this. I've been looking at Carl Jung. I've been looking at Bhagavad Gita. I've been looking at all of these things. I've been looking at Tao Te Ching, and they have been the thing that they have been life-giving experiences. You see, it's like all those ideas actually sing in you. And the beautiful thing about the tetrahedron and what Bucky has done, it's really spectacular. Really spectacular what he has done, because what he's doing is that he's providing a metaphysical and structural foundation for what we have experienced at 52 Living Ideas. In the process of going through it, because we've been going through this, we've been going, in a spiral way. We've been doing all kinds of things which are consonant with it. But suddenly, with the tetrahedron and with all the work that Bucky and many people like Struppi and Kurt and all the people who are going to come and speak, that they have spent enormous amount of time looking at the relations. Because see, it's in one sense, it's very simple. It is just reality. At the same time, it is reality. It has everything in it. It's about everything. And every time you look at it, you discover more and more and more and more. So, Mike, what I would say is that I'm just getting started. Thank you. Thank you.
Protein folding is the secret of life itself and immortality. Not to mention that diamonds are the hardest substance known, especially when they're reinforced by nanotechnology and protein folding.
Wonderful.
So there's a lot there. I just want can we get an answer as to whether there's a dictionary, because this is the language of God, but we need a dictionary.
Well, to give an answer to that question, there is a dictionary called the Synergetics Dictionary, which goes hand in hand with the book Synergetics, Volume 1 and 2, which was the co-product, the synergy of E.J. Applewhite, and Bucky. Because from my point of view, having read Cosmic Fishing, which is like the backstory of that process, Synergetics is an oral culture. It's an oral tradition. Bucky has grown his understanding of this way of the spheres practically by speaking his mind with people, playing with these structures, because the mind is not just within us, we're within it. And we can expand our mind by growing these structures, right? And then we can wrap our mind around them. And these structures are telling us way more than the books could, right? So that is there. There is the Synergetics and the Synergetics Dictionary. However, I find that much of Bucky's language, as beautiful and as poetic as it is, it also, because he was in a very strange position, I think he was perhaps the first person, at least in recorded history, where the first person within this civilization who radically questioned the reasoning behind the 3D reality stuff and all of those abstractions. And in order to be understood at all, he kept quite a lot of the language. he created new one where he had to, but he kept language, like calling it tetrahedron for a long time before he went to tetravertexion, but that's a different story. So all of that is to say, I am back at the oral part because I come from oral music and dance traditions. I've come from capoeira. I've learned to play first before I learned synergetics. And then I got into that and I realized, oh, it's the same thing. And I'm learning this by talking with people, by telling these stories, by creating more and more structures. And I have been recording videos mostly, which you can find on my YouTube channel. You can find stuff on my Instagram where I share stuff every now and then. And we've created a website called fullerfeedback.systems, which kind of tries to gather some of the stuff, but none of us is really good in that internet stuff. You know, it's all boxes. It's not easy to fit the spheres into the boxes. But I am more than happy to share this stuff with anyone who's interested, be it one-on-one. You know, if you have two people, chances are they bring 4 eyes into the mix, right? So that's a very good place to begin. I'm more than happy to share whatever I can with this group at large. And I don't know, there is some people in my vicinity who are working with AI and stuff like that. So maybe there's some transcribing going on that I don't know about. But just to bring this up, because you spoke of the helix, so this is one of the things that grows out of 4 eyes. If you put 4 eyes together without their complementary 8 eyes, you grow, among other things, stuff like this, which is a tetrahelix, right? So this is a little finger point at the fact that this is really the way that the universe is doing stuff. And this is where the way we've been taught to think, the conditioning of our conceptions, which shape the way that we perceive the world, is in terms of abstraction. What does abstraction mean? It means we have a river and we abstract water. We take a channel off of the river and we're working with that. So all of this civilization has been well channeled within that abstraction. And what that means is when we are realizing something, we're planning out everything we're having a blank sheet of paper beginning with square one. We make a plan. We need this, that, and the other. We need to make the whole place plain so the tables don't run away, all of that stuff. And then we want to realize it, and we need to do something which we call rounding, because there's always these trailing numbers behind the measurements, right? And we need to round in the end, which is the step back from the river, from the abstraction, from the channel back into the river. However, what synergetics allows us, this way of spherical thinking, is to become aware again that we are indeed the river. We are universe. We're integral to it. We're identical with it. And as we are the river, and as we know more and more of these principles, we become able again to consciously direct this river wherever we need it, right? So we don't need to abstract and break and force anything, right? My latest video was on the concept or the terminology of Wu Wei in Taoism, because there is, I mean, there's modelability in that even, because Wu Wei is to let be. And to let universe be what it wants to be does not mean we need to do nothing. We just don't need to force anything.
Thank you, Struppi. Struppi, please feel free to put your links in the chat. Would appreciate that. Now there are several other people whom I want to invite. Tim, Richard, and Steve, if you would like to comment on tetrahedron or anything. Tim, would you like to say anything about the tetrahedrons and its place in Bucky's thought?
It is the minimal system in the universe. It separates the inside from the outside, and you can't make any system smaller than it. So,
wonderful.
yeah.
Thank you, Tim. Richard, what about you? Would you like to say anything about the tetrahedron?
Yes, yes, thank you. I'm sorry I can't get my video to work, but I guess the main thing I want to talk about is the understanding in the work that I was doing that the only way you can put the observer and the observed together, observed in the sense of three-dimensionality that we all talk about, is through the 60-degree angles of the tetrahedron, and then you see the observed being connected to the observer. And you can't have, as Bucky showed basically in the Goldilocks story, you can't have the observed without an observer. In that sense, there is no trinity without the connector or the observer. So that was a beautiful sort of an awareness for me. And it was also very important to show in my work that when the observer views his or her three-dimensionality, that means I can see you, but I can also see behind you, which you can't see. And when you are the student, in my case, being a teacher, the student observes me as part of his or her three-dimensionality and can see things that I can't see. And so you have this interconnection between two observers and two very different observed three-dimensionalities that everybody thinks is the same because we're all in the same classroom. So, and I could move students around so they could see that when you sit in a different chair or a different part of the room, you actually observe that same room differently than you did when you were in another chair. So it really helps you physically, in a sense, demonstrate to students what tetrahedrons are all about, and also what it means to, in a practical sense, to deal with the metaphors of observed and observer, and the importance of taking context into consideration rather than thinking everything is absolute.
Wonderful. Thank you, Richard. Richard, we are doing 100 presentations on Bucky, and I would love to have you participate. So I'll reach out to you and we will figure out something that you might want to talk about. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Steve. Steve, what do you think of tetrahedrons? Welcome back.
Wow. I'll tell you, Joe is over there having a mental orgasm, and he texted me and said, "You have got to get on this presentation." So I'll tell you, and I didn't get to see it. I'm going to watch the video, but and you asked me what I think. I have 4 little epiphanies that have come to me over a period of time. The first thing is that the tetrahedron is not just a geometric figure. Bucky thinks and invited us to think in terms of a thinkable set. And so this whole thing goes into the geometry of thought, as if, and so that as if thought is something just as real as the table. And that was one thing. And the thing that blew my mind was, after pondering it for a while, we normally think in terms of 90 degrees. Our three-dimensional reality is 90 degrees. If I take that 90-degree angle and I switch it to 60 degrees, suddenly I come up with this animal. And so the tetrahedron becomes a 3D representation of 4D reality. This blew my mind, and I've been pondering this for a long time. I wish I'll hear what was said earlier. Then notice this, that in this tetrahedron, I've took the edges and made them oppositional. So there you see the blue bars, the blue edges become orthogonal. The yellow edges are orthogonal, and the green edges are orthogonal. 3 orthogonal representations in a 4D model of reality. Finally, and if I can be so bold, this whole concept of the thinkable set I would love to share a little quick diagram of the subvisible and visible. May I?
Yeah, give me a second. I'm going to make you a co-host so you can share. Hold on. Go ahead.
Because this thinkable set thing has just blown my mind. I've spent many months on this. In cosmology, Bucky talks about the tetrahedron. This is a tetrahedron right here. These little swirly lines with the 4 dots. And he diagrams these things. The brain stores the ABCD. The brain experiences the ABCD, but the interrelationships must be intuited by mind. And then as I took this, I said, now, why did Bucky, when he graphed out the ABC, why did he go AB, BC, CD, AC, BD, AD, and leave off the others? So I built a little chart. And here we have the visible tetrahedron, and here's the subvisible, and now we got 720 degrees. And so I'm so excited to drop in on this. The only other thing I want to say is that the tetrahedron, besides everything else, is a fractal of itself. So it fractals, the double of a tetrahedron is a tetrahedron inside the tetrahedron, and the tetrahedron is inside the other tetrahedron. So there's that bow tie over there. Mm. But so this blows my mind. Thank you for letting me share. There's a rant.
Wonderful, wonderful. Steve, we would love to have your rant. We are doing 100 rants on Bucky, so would love to have you. I'll reach out to you and we'll figure out something. Okay. All right. So now, folks, anybody else? So let's now go to comments. Go ahead and type exclamation mark if you would like to ask a question, make any comments, or would love to hear what your reaction to tetrahedron is. You can see, like, I just began I did this little presentation, and then all these people show up out of nowhere, and look at how much they added to the tetrahedron. Look at that. This is synergy. Okay, this is synergy in action. Next up is going to be Evanique, followed by Paul. Evanique.
Okay, so I want to thank everybody for their presentations today. I'm not sure I fully grasped everything, but it was fascinating. So thank you to everyone who presented and who showed their diagrams and everything. I just have a couple of questions. So my first question is, when you were talking about every center is the center of the universe, and no matter what, I guess spiritual practice you're talking about. So my question is it what speaks to you is what you should follow? And is there value in studying what does not speak to you?
Okay.
So that's the first question.
Okay. Let me actually point you to a video on just this very topic. Yasuhiko Kimura has done an entire session on what he calls the omnicentric. He's saying the world is omnicentric. It's the same idea of microcosm and macrocosm, that all of it, it's the same idea as Atma and Brahma. It's saying that, we have the Brahma within you, Tat Tvamasi. You have that. And it is multi-centered. So I have it and you have it and he has it. So it's like all people, each person has that. So it's a very profound idea. But let's go to the next question. Let me get all the questions so that we can get to everything. Go ahead.
Okay, so the second question is, do the spheres connect us?
Let Struppi go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is we're generally speaking, humankind is rendered illiterate when it comes to shape and structure and relationships, because all our thinking is framed in a way that does ignore the relationships. But if we think about our being, we realize all about it is spherical. We have spherical minds. We're using them with if you like, an operating system that is like having a quantum computer and running Windows DOS on it. Like it's a very limited system that runs on that very much unlimited resource. But if we think about our bodiness, we realize, for instance, the fact that I can see depth has to do with my two eyes looking at one world. That's a triangle. Same for perception of depth and sound. Two ears, one world, triangle. I can hold on to things because this is an open triangle that closes around whatever I hold on to. My hand, my arms, what I fathom is what I can wrap my arms, my triangle around. The fact I can walk is because my legs are two sides of a triangle and the earth is the third, right? I can speak for that reason. I can eat, all of these things, all of our senses turn out to be spherical in one sense or another. And yes, the spheres connect us, right? Because in the end, our boundary is binding inside to outside, but it's both us. Inside and outside is both us. So the moment I'm breathing is when I'm participating by being alive and animate. I'm participating in the oneness that is kinship earth, right? The earth has an air ocean and a water ocean, and we're constantly participating reciprocally with that air ocean, breathing in and out. What goes in is mind, what goes out is wind. Same thing inside out. So yes, the spheres are what connect us, because in the end, everyone is a sphere on their own, constituted of smaller spheres of one kind or another. And the relationships between us always follow the same patterns. And you were asking before about something which was the...
Ebony, can you go ahead and repeat the first
Shrikant,
question?
I don't think you answered the question. The other one before.
I deliberately did not answer it, but Ebony, go ahead and ask it again.
Okay, so the question is what speaks to you?
Ah, yes, that part.
Yeah, and then the value of studying what does not speak to you.
Yes. So my answer to that is going along with Bucky, because Bucky said he identified at least four kinds of integrity, right? There's the integrity of the whole, that is universe, the integrity of tension, which is tensegrity, the integrity of pattern integrity, and the integrity of the individual. And that was what he identified as the crucial bit that decided whether we were on a path to utopia or oblivion, as he called it. And what he really urged everyone to was to find what it is that we feel drawn to, right? Because all of this spherical thinking is about drawing attention, right? Relationships are drawn, they aren't pushed. Nothing in the universe is pushing or forcing, right? There is not a single muscle in our body that can push. All of them draw, but some of them draw this way and some draw that way. So we get the illusion of being able to push something when really we're still drawing, right? So my answer to your question is everyone feels drawn to something, because that is the way that we find a path. We find the way that we're supposed to walk. But this is a reciprocity again, where the path is drawing our attention here and then there and then there and then there. And we're constantly shifting the focus of our attention to this detail and then to that whole and then that. And, you know, as if we're wandering in a forest, and you always have the shift of depth perception, and then you go into this clearing of the forest, and then a leaf draws your attention, and you're going into small and to big, into front and to back, shifting and swimming in between these places. And what I feel is that everyone feels drawn to do something. And that is what universe wants us to do. That's the voice of Gaia, the voice of universe speaking to us, whispering in whatever tongue we need to hear it, you know, because nobody is drawn to the same thing. And that's
Wonderful.
a beautiful aspect of life.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Struppi. And great question, Evanik. Folks, if you'd like to make a comment, if you'd like to make a comment or ask a question, go ahead and type an exclamation mark in the chat, or you can raise your hand in Zoom, whatever you prefer. Okay, let's go with Paul next. Paul, go ahead.
I had to go get my guitar in the middle of Struppi's presentation. And I want to ask a question that's musical, because it's just so exhilarating. This is going to be, I might have to do Tuesday nights as well as Monday, Shrikant, we'll see. But I've been studying, just as Shrikant studies all these things, I've been studying the diminished scale, just by coincidence. And I find it fascinating to relate to this, because it's one of the few scales in Western music that is totally symmetrical. So it's half step, whole step, half step. So you can, so actually I brought my guitar, I put my guitar out and I thought, well, okay, so this is a diminished chord. And this is actually 8 chords. I mean, yeah, 8 chords, because it's both like the 7th flat 9 and also the fully diminished. You could, and so my point is, you can use it in those 8 contexts. Let me put it that way. But it also, so I was starting to think of it as you talked, like the minor thirds are the faces and the notes are the vertices, or if you just use the diminished scale, which sounds so much more like the real world than the major scale, which is this warped asymmetrical thing. So the half step could be the vertex and this the face. So I'm going to write music based on all that immediately at the end of this meetup. And I would love Shrudi's comments on how this all relates to music, and maybe there'll be a whole meetup on it. Thank you.
Please, go ahead, Struppi.
Okay, well, that's a big topic. And I already said I originate with music and dance and playing. And to me, that was what really drew my attention to synergetics, right? Because I had a very long arc. I feel like I can look back at my life and I've always been looking for this, really. I've been asking the same questions about why is it that we're stuck in this nonsense and what is the answer and all of that. I wrote countless songs on that and whatever. And then I got into permaculture, realizing, oh, this is the same thing I've been doing with the music and dance and capoeira, just in gardening and other realms. And then that led me to geodesic domes, one thing in permaculture. And that's the one use of synergetics that has been popularized. And when I grew my first geodesic sphere out of bamboo in my mom's garden, I was struck by the fact that this process was unlike anything else I had been doing in my life when it came to creating something, constructing something. But it was very much the same thing as dancing. It's that constant balancing, and balance really is not this. Balance is this, right? And it turns out synergetics, spherical thinking, that's all music. Music is one of the easiest ways for us to do it because we don't have to think in boxes to make sounds. But every time we sound, every time these waves emit and weave their patterns, what happens in that case in the realm of pressure differences in the medium that the sound travels through, all of that is the same kinds of patterns as these. The same is true for light and color and electromagnetic radiation. And I don't have all my models here right now, but I can tell you and promise you that there is lots of things we can look into in depth, including what Bucky called the jitterbug. I call it the dance of the Tao, which is kind of a way of weaving waving space-time so that it shows that all of these individual structures, 4 eyes, 8 eyes, dozen 8 eyes, are actually, in fact, members of the same transformation, the same movement. So it's all the same. It's one, as the Tao says. The Tao is one, but that gives rise to the many, because this one can become many. That's its nature, right? And in music, it's the most clear, because every one of us is a tune of universe running wild. And when we meet someone, we change maybe the chords, you know, maybe the harmonies change because we get this little influence on our melody. But we've been running music since the dawn of time, and it's a beautiful thing. And it's so beautiful because it reaches us on a level that is well below all of that abstraction, right? It can touch immediately. And it's a good thing it can, you know, it's where would we be if we hadn't had that?
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Struppi. I want to add a couple of things. First, about music, and second, about your comment about Bucky was part of the oral culture. He spoke a lot of things. So music, you know, I grew up with Indian classical music. I sing Indian classical music, which is a spiritual discipline, actually. So it goes to the deepest. You're trying to express the deepest things. I want to connect that with the oral culture. Okay, oral culture at its best, when you're hearing somebody speak, who they are is apparent to you. The emotions are carried in the tone. The interaction, interpersonal interaction, is apparent. All of that is lost when you write things down. Just use that as the only mechanism or a primary mechanism. There is tremendous value to writing. Okay, writing is crucial to civilization. But what we found is that all these works, Tao Te Ching, Bhagavad Gita, and Gospel of John, are written during this, what is called the scribal time, where the way they engaged with writing was that they would speak out the book that they are reading to others, discuss them back and forth, put it back into writing, whether it is Aristotelian's peripatetic school or Aquinas or the Gurukuls in India, or Lao Tzu and his students. You know, there is that loop between the written work covered by this envelope of oral, which brings it to full life. And in a sense, that is the tradition that we are part of in this 52 Living Ideas. We do these meetups. We've done 1,000 meetups. Okay, we talk incessantly with each other about everything, all the deepest things that we can think of, and have everybody speak their mind fully, go back and forth, and it produces something which is magical, which is actually kind of anachronistic. This is what it would be like in in Aquinas' time, or in Panini's time in India, or Lao Tzu's time, that this interaction between people, deep interaction between people, would be the standard operating procedure. Next up is Joe. Folks, if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and type exclamation mark. Joe.
Yeah, I just want to thank Struppi for his presentation. I mean, this has absolutely been fantastic. As Stephen noted, I actually went so far as to texting him and saying he had to get into this. I was just wondering if you could go over really quick how the Gaia hypothesis actually fits into spherical thinking. Does that?
Go ahead, Struppi.
Yes. Well, okay, let me wrap it this way. Bucky termed or coined the term spaceship Earth, right? He was he was an industrialist, hence all his mass-produced solutions and the sleek, uniform look of Synergetics, the geodesic domes and everything. He wasn't living through the space age, right? When everyone was going to space, and he was going, you know what? You don't need to go anywhere to be in space. You're in the middle of it. We're members of Spaceship Earth. Well, now a few generations have passed, and there is a growing sense, you know, sparked by people like David Abram, and among others recently Sophie Strand. There's a whole lot more probably. People who reanimate our sense of being, right? They bring back animism into the picture, into our understanding, and they show us that all of these boxes of civilization, boxes and boxes, are really built on the foundations of animism by ignoring them, right? They ignore the fact that literature, like the alphabet, is a specific kind of animism. It's the words in the book speaking to us, right? We're looking at images, pictures, drawings, symbols, and we hear a voice speaking to us. So with all of that, what I'm growing more and more aware of is the centrality, whatever, the central role of kinship, right? Because all members of universe are kin. You and I are kin, so is the cat, so is the tree outside. We're all kin. And there's a word for that, which is kinship. So I speak of Earth not as a spaceship, but as a kinship, right? And to recognize that is to be aware that actually we're growing, as Alan Watts would put it, we're not coming into the world, born into the world, we're born out of it. We're coming out of Earth, out of the womb, into a common womb with it, which is the atmosphere, right? So actually we are all together membering actively this kinship Earth. We are members of the membrane, if you like. And as such, we are all Gaia at play, right? Gaia is living through all of us, be they two-legged or however many, you know, winged or feathered or whatever. We're all, Sophie Strand calls it the animate everything. I call it animatter, you know, animate matter, where all of it is alive to begin with. Even a rock is alive. Crystal life is a kind of life. It's a very different one than what we call biological life, but it is alive nonetheless, because everything that is existing is doing so presently, actively, processively, if you like. So you see, earlier we had this thing with the nouns and the verbs. I think you spoke of that in the beginning, Shrikant. And from my point of view, I've come to realize that a noun is still a verb. It's just a more structured kind of process, right? If the process is so clearly making a pattern that we can name the pattern, and that's what we call a noun. But it's still a verb, it's still a process. And you and I would call each other beings, right? I am a being, but isn't being present continuous of be, right? So it's a superficial layer of the language which comes with this whole civilized book culture where
Struppi, I just want to, I
Yes.
can't resist interrupting to just make a comment. You know, I was looking at the word be and the roots of the word be. It's the same as bhu in Sanskrit, which is to grow. So to be
Buddha,
is to grow.
Buddha. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, indeed. And to grow is to grow as a sphere, right? As a tree. A tree isn't growing up or down, it's growing all around. And when we cut it, we see the rings, but those are really layers of a sphere all around the whole tree, right? And it's growing everywhere at once. And the same is true for you and I. We're growing from one cell, meeting another, drawing that in, going bloop, now we're 2, now we're 4, now we're 8. And then from there, we grow layer by layer, but we're not growing up first and then out or something. We're growing this way. And that's the way it goes with everyone. And, you know, this animism, I think, where I am, all of these things are one. You know, I learn as much from Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi as I learn from David Abram and Alan Watts and Bucky Fuller. And to me, it's all speaking of the same in many different languages, but I'm trying to find words that go more simple, right? And speak more truly to what I find going on.
Struppi, let me interrupt you. Struppi, I was planning to kind of schedule you for March because that's the earliest spot I have, but I have a spot this Friday evening. Would you like to do that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, sure. I will write to you Friday at 9 p.m. Choose any topic, you know, any topic on Bucky, anything, you know, we have really missed the Tao. We spent 100 meetups, almost 200 hours going through the Tao. We had a couple of people doing translation just for our group. So we're very much into Tao. So one of the possibilities is to see the connection, what you talked about, that you saw the Tao and Bucky's ideas going together. And that's actually going to be really, really fascinating. So if you want to talk about that, if you want to show more structures, more things that you've built, that would be great. So Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern time?
I will see what that is in European time, but I'm gonna commit to this, and I'm telling you, the way that I do is playing out loud or playing by heart. You know, I don't need to prepare anything.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna be with you.
Yes.
And whatever comes out of the meeting is gonna be what
perfect. Beautiful. And we can do it in any which way. We can go back and forth. I mean, this is the format that we use as well. As you said, you know, it's like we were not planning. I did not know that you would be here, but as soon as you were here, we completely changed the format so that we could make the most of it. And that is true for everything. You know, our Bhagavad Gita meetup, we started doing Bhagavad Gita meetup, and somebody from India showed up, a guy called Yogeshwar, who had been studying, you know, who had been studying Sanskrit for 4 years. He's read he just doesn't just know Bhagavad Gita by heart. He has read every Sanskrit commentary on Bhagavad Gita and has stayed with the people who study it for 6 months at a time in order to master it. And he just came and started talking about that. So it's amazing. For Gospel of John, we have a gentleman called Gary, who, again, he just showed up. He's done masters on this foot washing scene. See, foot washing scene in the Gospel of John, it is exactly about what you're talking about kinship. You know, that is the statement, you know, the new commandment, that you love one another just like I love you. So that, you know, transferring that love between father and son to each and every human being. I mean, that's another version of the same. So there is so much echoes of that. And so just wonderful. All right. Next up is going to be Evanique. Folks, anybody else wants to put an exclamation mark, go ahead and if you would like to comment. I would love to hear people's reaction to the tetrahedron and what we are doing, because we're going to be studying tetrahedron for two years now, you know. Go ahead and type an exclamation mark if you'd like to comment.
So Struppi, thank you so much for like all that you've done tonight, and it's been fascinating. I just had one more question. The tetrahelix that you put up earlier, to me, it looked like a DNA strand. Is that a coincidence, or is it just something I'm seeing?
No, it's no coincidence. I mean, the helix as a pattern originates with this. This is like the most fundamental incarnation of a helix, right? And this is one way of growing it. There's a YouTube channel called the Field Structure Institute, which has closely related to synergetics. And they've recently had a few sessions with someone who's studying kinds of tetrahelix. He's created a program to generate all kinds of these things, because really, you know, the amount of options of complexity are infinite. There is no end to that, and everything is going beautiful. But if we look at the DNA as one kind of helix, then we find sets of, like, it's a complex structure, right? It's a complex of different kinds of molecules that make all over this kind of pattern. But what we find is we have the information in that wrapped up in triplets, right? That's 3. So every triplet is a triangle, if you like, stretched out along the DNA strand. And then we have 4 bases, 4 bases that come in 2 pairs. If that isn't a 4-eyes, I don't know what is. Right? So you could take a 4-eyes and say, here is one corner, that's adenine, one corner is cytosine, guanine, and thymine. 4 corners, there you go. Yeah, you've got your 4-eyes. So another thing is, then those are translated into amino acids, and there's 20 of them. Now, I don't speak of 20 anymore because I've become convinced, I've been taught by the spheres that everything in universe is going in dozens, right? Universe is doing Zen, does Zen, do Zen. And all of these things, all of these structures are embodying dozen. And in terms of that 20ness, 20 is actually 1,008. And there is, again, repercussions and resonances between that number and these structures abound. So my study of genetics was in school. It's been a long while past, but I know for a fact that one of the first people that do these sessions in the next year is Daniel Ari Friedman, and I think he's a lot more closer to that. Perhaps there's going to be some juicy stuff coming from that.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Struppi. Next up is Joe. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is, again, this whole presentation has been, it's given me just, I've experimented with tetrahedrons, quite a bit, but this has been unique. This has been special here this evening. And actually, one of the things, and building on the tetrahelix example, that also applies, you can also apply that to organizational structures, can't you, as well? Is like how you look at organizations, like one triangle is just one part of a greater organization, and you can break it apart as a way of seeing the whole. I've attempted to do that on my own, but it's gotten a little complicated. But is that a proper use of a tetrahelix?
Definitely. And, things might seem very difficult, but they aren't, because we call all of this box mind stuff, the solid understanding of universe, we call that orthogonal. There's orthodoxy in it, because it's all about right angles, orthos. Now in Latin that becomes rectilinear, right? And we still have the resonances of righteousness, erect, rectify, whatever, all these things. Whereas the left is left out, right? It's sinister in Latin. And sin, and then we get back to synergy, syntropy. There's something there. And my mother tongue is German, right? So lots of the wordplay that I do originates in my tongue first, and then I translate it into English, but sometimes it goes the other way. And I've very early, maybe before I began calling these triangles eyes, I called them left angles, because we have the convention of calling 90-degree right angle, but if there is right, there's always left. and the one that's been left out. We call these things so complicated, cumbersome, you know, equilateral triangle, all these big words for something that is so simple. So a 60-degree angle, which is the one in the equilateral triangle, to me, that's a left angle, right? And the left angle is the one, the missing link. Now, link in German, left is links, right? So missing links. And this has been left out of his story because this is really their story. It's the stories of the spheres, and it's not a singular one, it's a plurality. And they are all, as the generalized principles of synergetics, all omni-interaccommodative. They're all making room for one another. They're complementing one another. They're never in opposition. And that is an incredible thing to have if we think about it, you know. And one of the many ways in which we have been programmed in our thinking is that we think in terms of parts. You know, we think the whole is an assemblage of parts. So we take it apart and look how does the frog work? Let's cut him up, right? We are constantly on the lookout for the building block of life or reality, thinking in terms of blocks as we build the houses out of them. Now, life doesn't have building blocks. Life doesn't come in parts. That's why I speak of members, because every whole is a membership. And this plurality, this polyformity is absolutely integral to this oneness. You know, like the Tai Chi Tu, the so-called yin and yang. It's a beautiful representation of the Tao, because it is not just yin and yang, but it is yin and yang. Both together make the whole, right? And that is the way of Taoism, and also the way of synergetics, is to never ignore the whole, be mindful of it, because we can grow anything out of it.
Wonderful.
Never dismissing any of it, right?
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Struppi. I want to add one thing. See, left hand is connected to the right brain, and it's the right brain that has been left out. Right brain is the one that sees patterns. Left brain is the one that goes analytical, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's the one that breaks things into parts, loves to do that. Right brain is the one that is bringing everything together. Go ahead.
But in fact, we only have one brain.
Yes, exactly.
It's one brain, two hemispheres.
Yes.
Which are connected, but
yes.
Both. Here's another thing that spherical thinking is teaching us. A sphere is always twofold. There's the inside, the concave. Concave means with a cave, with a hollow. It collects, right? It collects the memories. Within the bodies is where the pasts live. But those are congruent with the convex outside sphere, right? So if we have a single sphere, it's already two. And when we go deeper into this stuff, I can give you proof for that statement. Unity in synergetics, this is always a recurrent statement. Unity is plural and at minimum two. Yes. So in the case of the brain, my thinking is actually we have 4 of them, right? Because those 2 hemispheres have both an inside and an outside to them. And I am absolutely certain that that plays a big role. I think if we're only focusing on the inside as we're trained to, you know, the wildest thing you can do in this civilization is to be thinking outside the box. Now, what I'm proposing is we can be thinking without the box, and we'll be better off.
Wonderful. All right, folks, this has been amazing. Struppi, if actually this time is too late for you, we can do Saturday. I'll go ahead and send you an email and we'll work something out. Okay, Saturday we can do earlier part of the day, which will probably be better for you in Germany. All right, folks, This is amazing, amazing stuff. And we are going to go like this for 2 years straight. On Sundays, we're going to be doing this. I want to tell you what we have coming up in January and February. January 8th, we have Daniel Ari Friedman, and he's going to be talking about the parallels between Buckminster Fuller and William Blake. January 15th, we have Peter Meissen. He's going to be talking about the concept of synergy. He has deep experience with Bucky. Next, January 22nd, we have John Brett talking about tetramine. It's going to be all about using the tetrahedron. Next, we have Kirby Urner talking about dimensions in synergetics. He has got an amazing, amazing slide deck on that. So he'll be talking about that. February 5th, this is now February. February 5th, we have got Kurt McNamara going to be talking about Bucky's comprehensivity in his design based on the first chapter of his new book. Next, we have Christopher Zeloff. He has some amazing cinematic footage of Bucky, which he's going to be sharing with us of some of his inventions and more. That's going to be on February 12th. On February 19th, D.W. Jacobs, Doug, is going to be talking about the theme of I am a verb. He has very, very deep ideas. He's the one who has done the play on Buckminster Fuller. And he's going to be talking about that idea. And then finally, on February 25th, we have got Robert Sandusky, and he's going to be talking about Bucky's design science and the 4 on-ramps that CJ lined out. So we've got an amazing, amazing program already there. And so look forward to it. So thank you, everybody. And Struppi, this is just amazing. So thank you for showing up. Thank you for participating. Really appreciate that. Wait a minute. We have Steve. Steve, go ahead. Folks, if you have comments, go ahead and type exclamation mark. Would love to hear anything.
I'm so excited. Listen, when I started getting to Buckminster Fuller, I had to get this magnet set. This is absolutely freaking amazing.
Okay. Give me the name. I need the
I'll put the link in the chat right now.
Please do. I need to
critical for understanding energy, synergy, and tetrahedron. I'll put the link in right now.
Please do. Please do.
And it's only $16.99. It's on sale.
Okay. No, I can't have enough of these. So
if I may,
yes, go ahead.
Just say something about that. I'm using a variant of that toy as well. There's many kinds of these. But one thing is beautiful about them. They are the quickest way, the fastest way of growing these structures. If you want to prototype something or something, these are brilliant. However, everything that you can do with those, you can do with beads and string.
Yeah.
Right? Yes. So I've put some links in the chat here to where I say how to grow 4 eyes and 8 eyes. That very pattern is the very one I'm using for all of these, whether they are some of the more exotic kinds of structures. And you see, these are tensecrities. They are dynamic and moving. They are alive and not static and not abstract and nothing. But you can grow the regular kinds of isotropic vector matrix, space-time structures, as well as all of these fantastic, fabulous, weird things. Like I've just grown a snake the other day, right? So this is, it's really moving exactly like the real thing, even though it's just beads on a string. And yes, please get those magnets if you can. But also know that if you find a shape with that, you can realize it in this way, and then it takes a little longer to make, but you can play with it rough. You can if you make them from wooden beads, they even swim in the water. And kids are great because they don't go like, oh, what am I going to do with this? But they just take it and the smallest ones. You know, I've handed some of these things to infants, and they don't think, they just go whoop, and their fingers find the place where they fit, you know.
Wonderful. Steve.
Yeah, I just want to say that the electromagnetic energy between that vertex and that edge is unbelievable. There is the two-ness that begins awareness. This is consciousness, is the two coming together. And until I got these magnets and could see how it just happens, it's like the universe is sitting there and all of a sudden the ball rolls into the edge and the relationship is created. This is so, to understand the electromagnetic energy, critical. The link is there.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Steve. And thank you, Struppi. And thank you, everybody. You know, thank you, Kurt. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Richard. Really look forward to having, you know, really, I'm very, very excited about the Bucky meetup. You know, this is something that CJ wanted to do. And this, because it's not just about Bucky, it is about Bucky and the world. You know, this is something that actually world needs. You know, this is a way of thinking in an integrated way. It is very commonsensical, you know, instead of holding on to these artificial patterns and trying to somehow fit world in them. You're starting with things in nature and you're building them naturally. And I love the term 4 eyes, because it actually captures, firstly, you know, you're just starting with the spheres and putting them together. So it's a much more natural structure than the line structure. And the shape of it is actually shaped. The overall shape is shaped by the way in which those spheres connect to each other. And they automatically provide these openings. And the 4 eyes, I love the term, because it is saying, look at it from 4 different angles. You know, look at it this way, see what it looks like. And so wonderful. Such a great evening. Thank you very much, everybody. This is, you know, I was planning something, I was very excited about it, and this is so much better than what we came up with. So what I was thinking of. So thank you so much, everybody who came, and we will continue doing this and building on it for the next 2 years. All right. Thank you, everybody. Good night.